So hi Kate, we're here at Parame 2022 and you've done your talk.
Yes, I have.
What were you talking about today?
I was talking about paranormal investigations in burial grounds, a bit of a contentious topic.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of rocking the boat, but with a PowerPoint.
Good, that's the way to do it. Did you put aside the argument across, or were you just opening the debate?
I like to present what's going on, present kind of the issues, the ethical and legal issues. I think people don't really consider when they wander into a cemetery at night. And then kind of hopefully people make their minds up at the end. But I've done some interesting surveys with investigators over the years and see how they've interpreted their usage of sites. Yeah,
because obviously burials is something you're interested in. You run the blog Burials and Beyond, so that's your kind of space, isn't it?
Yeah.
But do you think there's any difference to investigating a graveyard to investigating any location where there's been known deaths or identifiable people?
I do think so. My paper that I've been doing with my fellow doctoral researcher Janine Marriott mainly focuses on a lot of the increase in burial ground investigations that happened over lockdown. And that's when we saw people entering places with relatively recent graves, headstones, things like that, and conducting paranormal investigations and putting their equipment on modern graves where there are modern epitaphs, things like that. So there's the ethical issue towards the deceased and the deceased's family, but also this changing issue of usage and how we interpret cemeteries as communal and public spaces. Whereas in reality, they're in this real kind of liminal space. They're in a bit of a legal grey area. And so we don't want to, as investigators and as paranormal enthusiasts, we certainly don't want to, upset anyone who's grieving. But we also don't want to dismiss the needs and the spiritual beliefs of investigators themselves. So I feel like most people who are reasonable and reasonably minded, when you present the idea of, okay, we might be getting carried away with the giddiness, but these are graves to people who are mourned and who intended to be buried in a certain way with a certain treatment towards them.
Dignity,
And I think that's what we're seeing a lot nowadays, is this kind of lack of acknowledgement that there's a person in there. It's because the human remains are kind of out of sight, out of mind. So I think that needs to be addressed a lot more today.
Do you think it's out of a genuine curiosity, though, or is it just out of desperation for teams to get anywhere and produce any content they can?
I think it's a real mix. It's a real mix. It's because cemeteries and graveyards, especially if they're like 19th century Victorian, very elaborate cemeteries, they look amazing. They look spooky. They look like, the films we grew up with. And so they tick that box. And certainly if you're going to be live streaming and you want to entice people in, you show a worn, mossy cross, people are going to click on that.
Yeah, that's what you want.
So there's that aspect. But also, aside from the visual appeal, I think just having that identifier as, there are dead people here. Not there are individuals, there are dead people. Then that's sort of...
But how do you think that compares to somewhere, say, where there's fairly recently been an accident or a murder? Do you think the ethics are the same in those situations as well?
I think it's within the same... I'd say it's within the same sort of Venn diagram. Problematic. There's a few words that I ironically have problems with. One is respect and one is problematic. I think because they mean different things to different people. And I'm sure so many of us have seen that whenever the second a celebrity dies, there'll be someone live streaming. So we're getting in touch with Meatloaf this weekend. We're getting in touch with Queen Elizabeth II. Is the second someone's in the ground, they don't even have to be in the ground, the second someone stopped breathing, there'll be someone there with a REM pod going, how about it? So I think there's a lot of very serious ethical discussions that need to be had around burial spaces, around the deceased, and certainly around public figures that we haven't been having, mainly, I think, because of embarrassment. So I think we need the equivalent of sitting down over a nice cup of tea and just chatting about what is ethically responsible and what isn't. And I think we need to have more of an acknowledgement of, even if we're talking about contacting spirits, they are the spirits of people, and so we'd hope that they are afforded the respect of the living, and that's not what we're seeing a lot. It's not the most fun and accessible kind of topic to talk to people about, but I think it's incredibly important before before there are serious problems, before there's danger.
I think the fact it keeps popping up so frequently as a topic of discussion shows that it clearly is an important one.
Yeah, and certainly with like abandoned houses, things like that. I think we've got to be super aware that not only is it, legally trespassing, and no one wants to end up with a criminal record for a ghost hunt.
No, and I mean, if you're talking about abandoned buildings, that's the least of your worries when you think about weak floors and asbestos and falling ceilings.
Is it worth getting buried for?
Yeah, totally. It's an exciting week for you, isn't it? It's, on 2nd of October, Jack Osbourne's Haunted Homecoming drops on Discovery Plus.
It does.
And you're his co-investigator in
I
that,
am.
Which I think is fantastic.
Thank you.
How was it working with Jack?
Honestly, I was a fan of Jack's work before. I love Portals and the Osbournes, I Want to Believe, lots of things like that. And so I had this kind of preconceived idea about how he likes to investigate, maybe what he's like as a person. And then actually meeting him, hanging out with him, having this experience, it was wonderful. He's such a lovely, genuine person and a really, pardon the pun, a spirited investigator, that he's a very authentic person. And so being able to investigate with all of the kits that him and his team brought, and also with someone who I think we both describe ourselves as skeptical believers.
Yeah.
And so to approach these amazing places together with our kind of different viewpoints, I think brought something really unique. I honestly don't think there's a programme out there like the one we made.
Yeah, I mean, I watched it a couple of days ago, and I think where yours is really different is I think there is a dog here.
There's a hellhound.
It's the balance you bring to it. I think you really ground Jack in it, and a really positive influence on that his investigation.
Yeah, I think we were both quite good at keeping each other in check. Throughout. There were certainly some instances where we're using like Estes methods, where afterwards having that connection with each other and knowing that we were both on the same page and that we respected each other's experiences was really important to both of us, because there are some things in the series that genuinely affected us and have kind of hung about with us afterwards that we've struggled to explain. But it was also, just putting it plainly, it was damn good fun. Going around all these places where you're both really enthusiastic and you're having a laugh. Just the whole way through, we just had such a laugh. We were howling all the time. But also that didn't take away from the investigation, because
the investigation was done very well, yeah.
Thank you, yeah. We tried to remove as many like external influences or, like external sound bleed or anything that there could be. So we wanted to very consciously present something that wasn't exploitative, that wasn't really amped up just for entertainment purposes, that this is an investigation. If we get nothing, we get nothing.
Yeah.
If we get something, this is what we got. We'll try and debunk it, we'll try and explain it, but if we can't, we're still going to discuss that. And I think it was really interesting seeing all these spaces where Jack grew up in Buckinghamshire, and just how strangely all of these places ended up having quite dark, brutal histories that even he hadn't really noticed until we got there. So that was a lot of fun. I think we both had quite similar childhood experiences that left us with this kind of yearning for the paranormal. So we certainly bonded over that.
And obviously your sort of early years in the paranormal's pushed you towards this really lovely niche that you've got, which is the kind of Gothic and Victorian era of death and burial. And I mean, one thing I've always wanted to do is be able to step back in time and go to a proper Victorian séance.
Oh, honestly,
and
what
I don't care if they've got painted stuff and string, and it's all faked. I want to experience that as it was presented.
Yeah, bring the trumpets, bring the ectoplasm, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I want to experience it all.
I just think it'd be a fantastic performance piece, and I don't know why people aren't doing that anymore.
Exactly, yeah, bring back ectoplasm. Yeah, I was saying this earlier today, there's, everyone loves a bleeping REM pod or, calling out, but I don't think you've lived until you've sat opposite someone who's hacking up a bit of cheesecloth.
That's what you want, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so here's hoping for a resurgence.
How do you kind of deal with that conflict, though? Because there was so much fakery in the Victorian séance era. Yeah. But then a lot of those techniques are still current and used today.
Yeah.
So that,
I think it kind of put me in good stead. I mean, I've plenty of people have said before, I get so obsessed with the fakes. You know, if I find someone who was a terrible fraud, I'm like, right, tell me everything they did. Show me their methods. I need to obsess over them for a month.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it really puts me in good stead with modern investigations, because I'm sure many of us have been to events, to investigations where the evidence is a bit too good to believe. And so then you start looking at it, and then you suddenly realise that the bloke next to you is knocking on the underside of the table, or so-and-so is pushing a table. You know, so I think a basic knowledge, at least, of the early days of spiritualism and the early days of ghost hunting and spirit contact and the methodologies they used helps you be hyper-aware of how people could fool you. There will always be people who will take a certain sense of a satisfaction in fooling a group, even if it's a group of well-meaning friends. Yeah, I see fakes all the time, and it is disheartening, because you'd like to think, oh, we've grown away, we've moved away from the age of spiritualism and fraudulent mediums, but we haven't at all. We haven't at all, and we haven't even got more intelligent with it.
No, I know, and I know that with the show you've recently done, it was a stipulation of yours that you wanted it all to be done properly and ethically and transparently, which obviously comes across in it. But I mean, there's definitely still shows where I think there's the for entertainment purposes only tagline is warrant just to deter copycats from doing unethical things.
Yeah, I think the paranormal really is an ethical minefield. It's tricky, especially if you're doing a show and you need like these really, really long running shows. How many people would tune in if it was just a load of blokes sat in a shed for an hour with nothing happening?
Which is the reality, yeah.
Yeah, so I think by introducing history and personal experiences, then if you don't get anything, then at least you've still got an authentic show. Whereas if you're wanting to raise the dead with every single episode, then you will be inciting certain people to fake things, and that is a shame. But I think we're all more aware nowadays of the problems of exploitation of vulnerable people and things like that. And so for untrained investigators without any safeguarding experience to then go into someone's house and feel like that's appropriate, it is incredibly concerning. It's dangerous not only for the individual but for the investigators. You know, what if they're going into the house of someone who's really dangerous, who's armed, you know, and they just think they're going in for an investigation? I think it's quite concerning that it's completely unpoliced.
Cool, we'll leave it there because there's a lot of activity going on.
There certainly is. There's ghosts everywhere. We can't shift for them.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.